Was told I should go elsewhere, so I did. About a year ago, I was working for a manufacturing company that had mismanaged itself into a zero operating cash scenario long before I got hired on. After all the managers who had hired me and got fired with no notice, I got nervous and started looking around for other employment. At one point, I was trying to update a customer with status regarding some in-process issue that landed squarely in the newly appointed, but formerly as well, engineering manager's responsibility, and he told me I should never have brought it up and that I should just keep my mouth shut. I told him it was too late for that and that they wanted to update, but he was too busy watching TV on his iPad, which as far as I can tell is all he ever really did, so I told him that I would just reach out to his contacts for the update myself. He said, "Yeah, do that. And if you don't like how long it takes me to respond to the customer, you should just go somewhere else." Little did he know, I had an interview the next day. I have never quit a job with no notice in my life until that day. Get fucked, Timmy. Time to find a new job and accept any offer? Don't mind if I do. TLDR. My former boss, in a fit of anger, told me to get a new job because his business was failing, regretted it the next day, and told me not to leave. I left anyway to work for his friend's law firm. My former boss didn't realize that to actually make money, he had to show up for work. Instead, he came and went as he pleased and expected me to pick up the slack and essentially try to play the role of receptionist, paralegal, office manager, and attorney. I never gave legal advice. He just expected me to, and so did his clients. His friend was my divorce attorney and worked in the same building, so he'd pop in just to chat, see how things were going, etc. But he started noticing my boss was absent more than not and questioned how things were going. I started confiding in him that I was really concerned because I could see former boss shelling out more than he was making, and his clients were less than pleased at never being able to speak with their attorney. Then former boss started doing some unethical and shady things to move cases along, and I started getting really nervous about what would happen if former boss got caught and what it meant for me. I told my attorney/former boss's friend all of this, and he said that his own firm needed extra support staff, but he didn't want it to appear like he was poaching me from his friend on purpose, and that I had to talk with former boss about the state of the office and see if there was a way to salvage things. I never really got that chance though, because later that day, former boss stormed into the office and told me I needed to start looking for a new job and to just take the first offer I get because he was probably going to have to shut his doors in the next 90 days and he couldn't guarantee me a paycheck. I spoke with my attorney the next day about it, and he shrugged and said for me to just give my 2 weeks notice and call it a day. Later that same day, former boss came into the office and told me to hold off on finding a new job and to give him a month to turn things around. Sorry, but I've got bills to pay, so I'm not going to sit idly and wonder if I'm going to see a next paycheck or not. I drafted my 2 weeks notice, only because my attorney asked it of me as a professional courtesy to his friend, and gave it to my former boss at the end of the pay period. Cue surprised Pikachu. JPG look from former boss. You're leaving? But why? Per our conversation on that date, you advised me to find other employment, so I did. Where? Friend's law firm. Seriously? When I make this business work, I'm going to want you back. Is that going to be a problem? Good luck. What's he paying? Less than you and half the hours. But at least I know his checks won't bounce. I heard from my replacement on his first solo day. I trained him during my last week that my former boss regretted telling me on a whim to leave because I was the only one who knew anything about his cases. Sucks to suck. He shouldn't have left me to run his firm without help, knowing I'm not an attorney or licensed paralegal, while he went on lavish vacations and ignored all his clients. Even if former boss wanted to try to get me to come back, I've already been bumped to full-time hours and gotten a raise in less than a month, and there's promise of a second raise very soon to put me at what I was making at former bosses, but here I get paid holidays, PTO, and sick leave. No way on God's green earth would I go back to former boss. Manager doesn't allow skin color descriptions. Not very satisfying, but MC nonetheless. Years ago, I was working at a corporate chain sports bar. One of the managers famously had short man syndrome, where he had to be right at all times and didn't allow anyone to deviate from his edicts. One day, a server was asking him to go talk to a customer due to our mistake. When asked which person to speak to, the server replied, "Table 300, the black guy wearing." As she was cut short by the manager yelling at her, We do not refer to people that way. We do not see race. We do not see color. They are all customers at this company. Do you understand me? Manager was sure to nitpick absolutely everything and micromanage her for the rest of the night. Fast forward a few weeks, same issue with the same server. Remembering his previous screaming fit, she told him to talk to the guy wearing orange at table 250. It was football season. Virtually everyone in the building was wearing the home team's orange. Manager had to awkwardly ask the customers who had an issue, deeply embarrassing him. Once he was back in the kitchen, he really laid into the server for embarrassing him before firing her on the spot. The next day, we all verified his previous instructions and her malicious, but correct, compliance. So the general manager was forced to call her up and offer her job back. Manager was not disciplined in any way, but that's restaurant life. You can find a better place to stay, by all means go ahead. So we're getting a couple of storms, and it's been heavy rain and wind for the past week. It's bad enough that certain areas are evacuated. I live in a pretty good house that can stand that level of wind and rain. Where it's located, flooding is not a concern. So relatives, friends, and neighbors are welcome if they need a place to stay. In comes Aunt Kay, 60 seconds, my mom's sister, and her 3 children, F32, M28, F20, with their children. Aunt Kay is a hassle, and honestly I'd rather not deal with her. But her place isn't in a good spot. So I let them stay at my place until the storm blows over. Aunt Kay has been nagging and complaining non-stop. All she does is lays around on her phone, complaining about everything she can think of. Her kids have told her to stop, which turns into her becoming a raging, screaming witch. So one day while we're in the living room, Aunt Kay comes in and was talking to another aunt, Emma. Aunt Kay was complaining about my place, and Aunt Emma was trying to tell her off, but ain't no stopping that word-vomiting hag. Aunt Kay then says she can find a better place. Mind you, it's been raining all day, and the winds have gotten stronger. You go outside and you'll be pelted and maybe fly off if you aren't careful. As her oldest is telling her to stop, Aunt Kay just keeps on going and tells me my house sucks and whoever built it had crap for brains. That set me off, as the house was designed by my parents, and they out their heart and soul into it. So I told her to leave and find a better place than if she doesn't like my place. Aunt Kay looked offended and started telling Aunt Emma what I had just said. Aunt Emma told her off and then hang her up. Aunt Kay looked at me and just tried to go back to her BDE. But I told her she had to leave and find another place. She didn't want to apologize and told me I was being sensitive and needed to respect my elders. I told her she didn't respect me, and since she could find a better place, she ought to leave. I wasn't backing down, so she went and got her stuff, and when she saw her kids and grandkids weren't going with her, she was not happy. I gave her an umbrella and some cash. That happened at around 9 a.m. She came back at around 2 p.m. drenched and defeated. She gave me a quiet apology and begged to be let in. Turns out she went around to some of her friends' places and even her BFs, but they were either gone or telling her off for freaking around in the storm. She now just lazes and keeps quiet. I don't care if she still complains, but at least I don't have to hear it. Edit. This happened in the Philippines. She did return the umbrella, but not the cash. It was 250 pesos for fare. This is nothing new from her. She'll try to push boundaries to get her way, but if I'm near, I call her out on it. She's a big believer in respecting your elders, but what she did is seen as a massive fudge you. You don't insult hospitality. She's been getting verbal smackdowns from other relatives for what she did. My place is in the shop? Okay. So I, 31F, have worked in the automotive industry for a long time, and I've worked my ass off to prove myself to be a competent mechanic. I do brakes, transmission work, engine swaps, whatever is need of me that day, and I'll help out the counter guys when they get backed up. I was helping the guys up front because they were backed up and I was waiting for a part to come in, so I didn't really have anything else to do. My boss comes out and tells me, "Your place is in the shop. Get out of the office." Okay. I go back into the shop and sit down while I wait for the part one need. Fast forward a week later. The front guys are slammed, and I'm looking for something to do, but I'm in the shop where my place is. My boss came out and asked if I'd help out. I replied with, "No, my place is back here in the shop. I'm following orders. You'll get caught up," and starting sweeping in the back. The other techs thought I was in the right, but my boss wrote me up for failing for follow orders. I'm confused. I stayed in my place. Forced to participate. Okay. A few years ago, my colleagues and I attended a training course. Part of it was communication, more theoretical than practical. The thing is, before this job I taught communication, among other things, for several years at a nursing school. That's why I just sat there quietly during that part of the training course. I didn't want to ruin this part of the training for my colleague or the course leader. During the short introduction round, I mentioned that I had taught communication and that's why I was holding back. Apparently, the course leader didn't like that. She asked for participation, and I said again that I didn't want to mess up her lesson because I probably already knew what she was getting at. She then said something like, "If you don't participate, you won't pass the training course." She then went too far with the sentence, "My course is very advanced. You can't do that." Okay, if you have to. She had already written the letters S and E on the board. The standard beginning for the classic blackboard picture for Schultz von Thun's Fourier's model. Her last comment made me no longer want to be nice. Should I go to the blackboard or join in from my seat? With a triumphant smile, she pointed to the blackboard. Well, I basically explained the model from memory the way I used to in my lessons, including the standard example, easier to understand examples, and hints as to where the difficulties in understanding this model lie. After that, she explained at length to everyone that everything I had said was nonsense because I had not used the correct technical term for an ear, but a different word that meant the same thing. Somehow the rest of the communication part was very monologue-like because my colleagues were no longer interested in their lessons. Cheap beats. Cheap beats. Short and fun story. Recent story in the last few months. One-time thing so far. Preface. My father and I share horrible handwriting. I have really cursive. My dad's can be worse. And so he'll write in print. So one of the more recent cursive mixed/print written times involving a grocery list where I made a funny. Okay, it was a prank. Story. I was at the store with this badly written grocery list. My dad was nice enough to break the list down into sections, so I didn't have to run department to department. So when I got to the meat department, I saw something written as cheap beef. In actuality, my father had odds are written cheap beef. Translation. Go check the manager's special section for whatever is cheap. I don't care, grab it. Still, I called to double check. Me, Dad. Hey, did you write cheap beats or cheap? Dad, sounding half asleep. Cutting me off, huh? What? Listen, I'm in the middle of working on something. You need to pick up whatever I put on the list. Me, but Dad, I just need to double see. Dad, look, I'm busy. Just either buy what I have on my list and we'll sort it out later. Cue malicious compliance. Me, okay, Dad. I hang up and decide to have a bit of fun. First thing I do is I buy a cheaper cut in the manager special section. Cover my butt, so dinner isn't ruined. Then when I'm in the produce section, I look for beets. Guess what? Organic is on sale. I call up Dad again. Me, Dad, how many cheap? Dad, cuts me off, look, either buy two or double, or guess okay. Good God. Me, can you at least tell me if you want organic? Dad, yes, organically grown or grass-fed is fine. I took everything to the checkout and paid. As I waked in the house to drop off my father's groceries, he starts double-checking it. Dad, hey, where's the... Me, I finally get to cut him off right here. I hand Dad the bag of cheap beets. Cue surprised Pikachu face. Me, you said everything on the list and guess what? They were cheap. Dad looks at his list, sees his mistaken T for an F, and looks at his bag. Continuing surprised Pikachu face. We had a good laugh, and a few minutes later brought him the real beef. Dad admitted he was actually asleep when I called earlier, so I woke him mid-nap, half flustered and annoyed. No fallout except I had to find an inventive way to cook beets, but thought the prank be worth it to slug through one beet dish. Though now Dad checks his list and even walks up to me and says, "It's cheap beef, son." He still laughs. Hope someone laughed from this one. All you can eat. Many years ago, over 20, my wife and I kept a boat at a lake near our home. The marina had a restaurant that had an all-you-can-eat fried catfish on the menu. These catfish were whole and just about the size of a grown man's hand. We had been eating there 3 or 4 times a month for the past 3 years. I held the record of 17 catfish consumed in Pete. The owner/cook always said that I was maxed out and could never better my score. Now comes the malicious compliance. Wife and I had 10 family and friends visiting for my birthday, and we all went to the marina for dinner. I boldly and loudly announced that I was going to beat my record of 17 catfish. Obviously, Pete overheard my braggadocio and took our orders. A lot of beer was being consumed. Pete brought out 9 platters, turned to me and said, "Beat your record and everything is on the house." With cheers all around, Pete then said, "Fail, and you have to give Gail and Debbie a 25% tip." Everyone, including me, agreed and just knew we were getting a free meal. Pete went back to the kitchen and brought out my first catfish. That sucker weighed 5 pounds. I could not even eat the one. Everyone laughed, and we did have a great time. And yes, the girls got their tip, and I never messed with Pete again. Pete and I remained friends until he passed away last year. He never tired of telling this story.